Mist clung to the forest like a veil, softening the edges of trees and hiding the shape of the river as it wound its way through the wilderness. The water glimmered faintly, silver in the morning light, whispering secrets that only the wind and the river itself could understand. Alara walked along its bank, her bare feet brushing the damp earth. She was small, slender, and quiet, with hair the color of wheat and eyes the deep green of the forest. Many villagers called her strange, some even feared her, but she had never wished harm on anyone. She only wished to help, to heal, to see life flourish where it could. Her hands were stained from herbs and poultices as she gathered wildflowers and roots along the bank. The river had always been her companion, a constant presence since childhood. It whispered to her in subtle ways, guiding her hands, soothing her mind. But that morning the whisper carried something unfamiliar, a cry of pain, jagged and urgent, rising above the soft sounds of the forest. Alara froze, heart quickening. She scanned the riverbank, eyes sharp, listening. Then she saw it, a dark shape thrashing in the current, a wolf caught and struggling, its fur soaked with water and blood. The beast's golden eyes, wide with panic, met hers for a fleeting moment, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. It was no ordinary wolf. There was intelligence there, something deeper, something almost human. The villagers' warnings rang in her ears. "Cursed wolves," they said, "they bring death to those who touch them." But she could not leave it there, not to die in the river. Compassion, fierce and stubborn, filled her chest. With careful steps, she approached the riverbank. The current was strong, tugging at her boots and laces. She waded in slowly, murmuring words of calm as she reached the struggling animal. Its teeth snapped at the water, not at her, but she knew she had to act. The wolf was too heavy to lift alone, and the river was fast. Alara gritted her teeth, found a branch, and used it to guide the wolf toward the shallows. Her arms burned with the effort, muscles straining, but finally, with a last surge of strength, she pulled it onto the damp bank. The wolf lay there, heaving, shaking, its golden eyes fixed on her. Blood matted its fur, and one of its legs was bent unnaturally, likely broken. She did not flinch. Kneeling, she set to work, tearing strips of her dress to make bandages, whispering soothing words over the creature. "You're safe now," she said softly, though she was unsure if the wolf understood. "I won't let anything happen to you." For a long moment, it simply stared at her, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Then, as if some tension inside it eased, it relaxed slightly, allowing her to touch its wounds. Alara's fingers worked quickly but gently, cleaning the blood and applying herbs she had prepared. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, filtering through the misty canopy. She had no thought for food or rest. She only had eyes for the wolf, who gradually stopped trembling and began to watch her with an intensity that both unnerved and fascinated her. Finally, the creature spoke. Not in words, but in a shift of presence, a weight of gaze so profound that Alara felt it in her bones. She did not fully understand, but it was as if the wolf knew she had risked her life to save it, and in return it recognized something in her: courage, kindness, and an unusual strength. Night fell faster than she had noticed, and the forest transformed under the silver light of the moon. Shadows lengthened, dancing among the trees, and the river's whispers grew louder, more urgent. Alara stirred a small fire and wrapped the wolf in blankets she had brought, offering it warmth. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, herbs, and the faint musk of the wolf. She drifted to sleep beside it, exhausted, trusting the river and her instincts. But the forest did not sleep. Somewhere, hidden among the trees, unseen eyes watched her. A low wind carried whispers, too faint to catch, but the sense of something ancient and powerful stirred the air. When she awoke, the wolf was gone, or at least it seemed so. The blankets were rumpled where it had lain, but no trace remained. Confused, she stood and scanned the clearing. And then she saw him. Where the wolf had been, there was now a man, tall, regal, and impossibly strong, with dark hair that glimmered like wet midnight. His eyes, golden and piercing, locked on hers. He wore a cloak of shadow and strength, and the air around him seemed to hum with power. Alara stumbled backward, fear and awe mingling in her chest. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man knelt slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I am Kale," he said, voice deep and resonant like the echo of thunder. "You saved me." Alara's heart raced. I saved a wolf," she said uncertainly. "I didn't know." Kale's eyes softened just for a moment, and she saw a flicker of something ancient, gratitude, sorrow, and loneliness that stretched across centuries. "You saved more than a wolf," he said. "You saved the Alpha King." The word struck her like a lightning bolt. Alpha King. Her mind swirled with disbelief and fear. He looked human, strong, alive, dangerous. How could the creature she had pulled from the river be this? And yet she felt it in her bones. This man, this being, was connected to her in ways she could not yet understand. Cale rose to his full height, and the moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face. He stepped closer, and with every movement, Alara felt a pull in her chest, a mixture of fear and fascination. "The river," he said softly, almost to himself, "has chosen well." You're saying the river saved you?" Alara asked, still cautious, still trembling. Cale nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "It carried me to you. You acted without fear, without thought of reward. That is why I am alive." Alara's chest tightened. There was something in his voice, a weight that went beyond mere words, a truth too large, too old to fully grasp. She realized then that her act of compassion had changed something far greater than she could imagine. She had stepped into a story that was older than herself, older than the forest, older than any human tale she had known. For the first time, she felt the depth of connection, not to a man she barely knew, but to something vast and mysterious, something dangerous. Her pulse quickened, her mind spun, but she could not step back. Somehow she knew that leaving now would be impossible, not just for her, but for him. Cale studied her closely. "You do not understand," he said. "What is coming? The enemies I fled are still hunting. And yet you have bound yourself to me." I only wanted to help," she said softly, fear and wonder mingling in her voice. "I never meant," Cale shook his head, a faint, almost sad smile crossing his face. "Intentions matter little, the bond is made. And now, Alara, there is no turning back. Your life, your choices, they are now tied to mine." The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and ancient magic. Somewhere a branch snapped, and she knew instinctively that they were being watched. Not by ordinary eyes, but by those who understood the weight of power and the danger of kings. Alara swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. What do you need me to do?" Cale's golden gaze softened, yet held a shadow that made her stomach twist. "For now, rest, heal. But soon the world beyond this forest will call for more than courage. It will demand sacrifice, and the bond between us, what has begun at the river, will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine." Alara nodded, though a shiver ran down her spine. She did not fully understand the man before her, or the powers he carried, or the danger he faced. But one truth burned in her heart: she could not leave him. Not now, not ever, perhaps. As she settled back near the riverbank, keeping watch over him as he rested, the moonlight shimmered on the water. The river whispered its secrets again, softer this time, almost in approval. The forest held its breath, and the night seemed to stretch forever. Somewhere beyond the trees, unseen and silent, eyes watched, waiting. Alara did not sleep that night. She stayed by the river, her hand brushing against the wet earth, her mind alive with questions and fear. And Cale slept fitfully, the wolf within him restless, muscles twitching beneath the human skin, as if the river itself had awakened something in both of them. By the time the first light of dawn touched the forest, a bond had been formed. A fragile, dangerous, and undeniable connection between a human healer and the Alpha King she had unknowingly saved. And neither of them would ever be the same. The forest seemed to lean closer, the river to hum louder, as if the world itself waited for the next moment, the next choice, the next challenge that would bind them together forever. And then from the mist, a shadow stirred. Something watched the clearing, silent and intent. Someone or something knew that the Alpha King was alive, and they would not rest until he fell. Alara felt a sudden chill. She did not yet understand the magnitude of what she had done by pulling that wolf from the river. But very soon she would. The forest had changed in the hours since dawn. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, yet shadows clung to the undergrowth as if reluctant to let go. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and awe swirling within her. Cale had not spoken much since the first light, yet his presence filled the clearing with an energy she could not ignore. "Come," he finally said, his voice low and commanding, yet gentle enough to draw her forward. He moved toward the riverbank with a strength that seemed to bend the air around him. "You must see where I belong, where you may belong as well." Alara hesitated. Her life had always been simple, quiet. She tended herbs, healed wounds, and walked the edges of the forest alone. She was not meant for kingdoms, curses, or kings. Yet something deep inside her, the part that had driven her to save a creature in the river, urged her to follow. Kale led her through twisting paths hidden beneath ancient trees. The forest seemed to recognize him, bowing slightly to his passage. Birds paused mid-flight, the wind stilled, and even the river seemed to shimmer in deference. It was both beautiful and terrifying. After hours of walking, they arrived at a clearing, and beyond it the sight stole Ilara's breath. Rising from the forest floor was a fortress carved from black stone, vines creeping up its walls, towers reaching like fingers toward the sky. The air thrummed with power, alive with enchantments that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. This was no ordinary palace. This was the seat of a king who ruled over forces beyond mortal understanding. Kale's eyes softened, but they still held that golden intensity. "This is my home," he said. "My people wait within, and now so does your choice." Ilara's pulse quickened. Her instincts screamed caution, yet she found herself moving forward. She could not explain why she felt drawn into his world, why her heart had opened to him in the forest beside the river. She only knew she could not turn back, not now. Inside the fortress, she discovered a world alive with shadows and light. Guards in dark cloaks watched with golden eyes that mirrored Kale's, some human, some not. The halls were vast, adorned with ancient tapestries depicting battles, legends, and long-forgotten kings. The scent of herbs, smoke, and something old and magical lingered in the air. Kale's people approached cautiously, but their respect for him was evident. They bowed, yet their eyes flicked toward Ilara with curiosity, suspicion, and in some awe. Kale's hand brushed hers lightly, a silent reassurance. "You saved me," he said softly. "That act, it changes everything." Ilara shook her head, uncertain. "I didn't know who you were, I only saw an animal in pain." "And yet," Kale replied, "you acted. That is the measure of courage." His gaze lingered on hers, golden eyes searching as if peering into her soul. The weight of his presence made her shiver, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. The evening came swiftly, the sun dipping behind the fortress walls. Ilara was shown to a modest chamber, simple but warm, with windows that overlooked the forest and river beyond. She tried to rest, but sleep would not come. Kale's words echoed in her mind, and a sense of anticipation and unease settled over her. She did not notice the wolf that appeared silently outside her window. It watched her for a long moment, then vanished into the shadows. The bond between savior and saved was stronger than she realized. It connected her not only to Kale, but to the wild magic of the world itself. The next morning, Kale led her to a private chamber deep within the fortress, filled with ancient scrolls, glowing crystals, and symbols that seemed to hum with energy. He motioned for her to sit. "There is much you do not know," Kale said, his voice quiet but commanding. "My people, my enemies, and the curse that binds me. It is old, older than any living memory. I have been hunted for centuries, betrayed by those I trusted, and bound by a power that will not let me rest." Ilara listened, heart pounding. She had always known there was more to the world than what the villagers believed, but this was beyond anything she could imagine. "The curse," Kale continued, "cannot be broken by force alone. It requires a bond forged by trust, courage, and something rare among humans, purity of heart. You, Ilara, have already taken the first step." Her voice faltered. "I'm just a healer, how could I help?" "You acted without thought for your own safety," Kale said. "That alone is proof. The river chose you, and in doing so, it began to weave our fates together. But understand this, your choice now matters. You may return to your life, simple and safe, or you may step fully into this world with its dangers, its power, and its promises." Ilara swallowed hard. Her mind raced. To step fully into Kale's world meant leaving everything she knew behind. It meant trusting a being of immense power whose very life was bound by curses and enemies. And yet, something in her chest burned with determination. She could not abandon him, not after what she had done, not after the bond they shared. I will stay," she said finally, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't understand all of it, but I will help you." Kale's golden eyes softened, and for the first time a faint smile curved his lips. "Then you must learn quickly," he said. "For the enemies I fled are still hunting, and they will not show mercy." Over the following days, Ilara began to understand the fortress and its inhabitants. She watched Kale interact with his people, saw the loyalty and fear in their eyes, the respect they held for their king. She witnessed the subtle rules of his world, the politics and power dynamics, and the burdens Kale carried. Every action, every word he spoke, held weight far beyond her understanding. Yet in private moments, Kale was different. He allowed himself to show vulnerability, something no human, or even most of his own kind, had ever seen. He spoke of his past, of betrayal, loss, and the centuries of solitude that had hardened his heart. Alara listened, her hands busy with herbs and bandages, yet her heart opening with each story. "You've lived through so much," she said softly one evening, tending a small wound on his arm. "And yet you still protect your people even when it must be so difficult." Kale's golden eyes softened. "It is duty," he said, "but you see more than duty, you see the man behind the king." Alara's fingers paused, brushing against his skin. A warmth spread through her chest, confusing and new. She had felt something at the riverbank, something that had grown stronger each day. Yet she could not name it, could not fully understand it. All she knew was that she could not deny it. Their bond deepened as the days passed, a delicate mix of trust, tension, and unspoken emotion. But even as they grew closer, danger loomed. Whispers reached the fortress, rumors of rival factions moving in the shadows, of assassins and hunters tracking Kale. Alara's presence was no longer secret, and some saw her as a vulnerability, a tool to manipulate the Alpha King. One evening, Kale took her to the edge of the forest, near the river where they had first met. The water shimmered in the moonlight, calm and beautiful, yet alive with its old, mysterious energy. "You were brave at the river," Kale said quietly, his gaze on hers. "Brave enough to face death without hesitation. That courage, it saved my life. And now it may save more than that, but bravery alone will not be enough." Alara looked down at the water, thinking of all that had changed in just a few days. She was no longer just a healer. She was part of a world of power, of curses, of kings and warriors. And yet the thought of abandoning it or him was impossible. A rustle in the trees made her heart leap. Kale's eyes narrowed, muscles tensing. "They are close," he said, voice low. "Enemies who do not yet know we are here, but soon they will come." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear alone, but from the realization that the bond they had formed was no longer safe. It made her a target as well as a savior. Kale reached for her hand, and the contact sent a spark through her, a reminder of the moment at the river when their fates first intertwined. "Stay close," he whispered. "Tonight we may need to run or fight, but no matter what happens, trust in what we have begun. It is stronger than fear." As darkness fell over the forest, the river glimmering like silver in the moonlight, Alara realized that her life had changed forever. She had entered a world of shadows, secrets, and power beyond imagining, and she was no longer alone. The first howl echoed through the trees, a warning, a threat, or perhaps a call from the wild itself. Alara shivered, gripping Kale's hand. She did not know what the night would bring, but she knew one truth with absolute certainty. The Alpha King she had saved in the river would no longer be alone. And neither would she. The night was thick with mist, and the forest around the fortress seemed almost alive, breathing in silence and shadows. Alara crouched beside the riverbank, her hands steady despite the tension curling in her chest. Kale stood close, his golden eyes scanning the darkness, every muscle coiled like a spring. The air was heavy with anticipation, and even the river seemed to hush, as if it knew danger was near. "You can feel it, can't you?" Kale murmured, his voice low and almost a whisper. "They are coming." Alara nodded, her heart pounding. She had begun to learn the rhythm of this world, the subtle ways magic and instinct wove through it. But even with her growing awareness, fear prickled at her skin. They were not just hunters or soldiers. Kale's enemies were cunning, patient, and ruthless. And now, by being with him, she had become part of the stakes. Kale reached for her hand, brushing her fingers with a touch that was both grounding and electrifying. "Stay close," he said. "No harm will come to you if you trust me." Alara nodded, though her chest tightened. Trust was easy to say, but harder to feel in a world so full of shadow and hidden dangers. She had saved him once, and now, by staying with him, she was stepping deeper into a story far larger than herself. The first attack came just as the moon reached its peak. Shadows moved silently through the trees, and then in a flurry of motion, figures lunged from the darkness. Kale reacted instantly, his movements fluid and precise, a predator protecting his territory. Alara froze for a heartbeat, then remembered her purpose: to help, to heal, to act. Using a small vial of herbs she had prepared, she threw the contents toward one of the attackers. The smoke created a brief distraction, enough for Kale to fend off another with a swipe of his hand. Alara's heart raced as she realized the danger was far closer than she had imagined. The battle was brief but intense. Kale moved with the strength and precision of a king, yet there was a strain on his face, a hint that even he had limits. Alara's presence, her quick thinking, and her courage made a difference, though she could feel the tension between them heightening. Every glance, every touch carried more than urgency. It carried recognition of their bond, of the trust forming between them in the face of life and death. After the attackers fled into the shadows, Kale turned to her, his golden eyes intense. "You did well," he said. "Bravery alone will not be enough, but it is a beginning." Alara's chest heaved as she realized how close they had come to danger. I want to help," she said, voice trembling. "I will do whatever I can." Kale studied her, a mixture of admiration and concern in his gaze. "You must understand," he said softly, "helping me is not just about courage. It is about understanding the past, my curse, the mistakes that shaped me. Only then can you stand beside me truly." Over the next days, Kale shared fragments of his story. He told her of his kingdom, once vast and prosperous, now fractured by betrayal. Of his people bound by loyalty and fear, some ready to follow, others waiting for weakness. And of the curse that clung to him like a shadow, an ancient magic that had stolen centuries of peace and forced him into solitude. Alara listened, heart aching for the weight he carried. Every word revealed a man who had loved and lost, who had been betrayed, and who had endured loneliness no human should face. And yet beneath the sorrow and the power, she saw glimpses of a man who still cared, still fought for his people, and still believed in some form of hope. "You carry so much," she said quietly one evening, tending to a small wound on his hand. "And yet you protect everyone else before yourself." Kale's gaze softened. "That is the burden of leadership," he said. "But with you, perhaps it is not as heavy. Perhaps there is someone who can understand, who can share this weight." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. She had always known she was drawn to him, but now, seeing his vulnerability, the pull was deeper, more urgent. And yet there was fear. Fear of the unknown, of the enemies still lurking, and of the powerful magic that bound him. Their days were filled with preparation. Kale trained her in the ways of his world, not just defense and strategy, but understanding the subtle threads of power that govern the forest and the river. Alara discovered a resilience she had not known she possessed, a capacity to act under pressure, to think quickly, and to trust her instincts. The bond between them grew stronger, a mixture of trust, admiration, and something unspoken, delicate but undeniable. But the past was never far behind. Whispers reached them, rumors of a former advisor, a man who had once been Kale's closest confidant, now turned enemy. He knew of Alara, knew she was human, and would use that knowledge to strike at Kale if given the chance. One night, as the moonlight shimmered on the river, Kale took her to a hidden chamber within the fortress. Ancient symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness, and a sense of magic filled the air. "This chamber," Kale said, "is where the past and present meet. Here I can strengthen my connection to the river, to the forest, and to those who stand beside me. But the ritual, it is dangerous. It will test us both." Alara's heart raced. "What kind of test?" she asked, voice trembling. "Not of strength alone," Kale said, "but of courage, trust, and heart. If I falter, the consequences could be dire." She nodded, though fear tightened her chest. She had chosen to stay to help him, and now she could not turn back. Together, they began the ritual. Kale chanted softly, hands tracing symbols in the air, while Alara followed, repeating words she barely understood but felt deep in her bones. The river's energy seemed to flow through the chamber, a pulse of power that made the walls hum and her heart race. For a moment, all seemed to go well. The light from the symbols grew stronger, the air shimmered with magic, and Alara felt their bond deepen, a connection so intense it made her chest ache. She saw visions of Kale's past, battles, betrayals, moments of love lost, and understood the weight he had carried for centuries. She reached out, touching his hand, and in that moment she felt not just his pain, but his hope, his longing for something more than solitude and sorrow. And then, from the shadows, a presence intruded. A figure stepped into the chamber, tall, cloaked, eyes glinting with malice. It was the former advisor, Kale's once trusted companion, now turned enemy. His gaze fell on Alara, a slow, calculating smile spreading across his face. "You," he said, voice sharp as a blade. "The human who dares to touch the Alpha King's fate. How amusing." Kale moved instantly, stepping in front of her, muscles coiled, eyes glowing with power. "You should not be here," he said, voice steady but dangerous. And yet I am, the man replied. And now your bond, your ritual, all of it will be undone. Alara felt a wave of fear, but also resolve. She could not let him harm Kale, not after everything. Drawing on the instincts she had honed over days, she stepped forward, chanting words she barely understood, guiding the energy of the chamber toward the intruder. The magic responded to her courage, shimmering brightly, and the former advisor faltered, surprise flashing in his eyes. Kale's strength surged as well, the power of the river, the forest, and their shared bond flowing through him. Together they pushed back, forcing the intruder to retreat, but not without cost. Kale stumbled, collapsing to one knee, golden eyes dimming with exhaustion. Alara rushed to his side, fear gripping her heart. "Kale, are you hurt?" He looked at her, a faint smile brushing his lips despite the strain. "I am alive," he said. "Thanks to you, the bond, it is stronger now because you stood with me." Her chest heaved with relief, yet she could not ignore the ache of the encounter. Their enemies were clever, patient, and ruthless. And now, Alara understood the depth of the danger they faced. That night, as they sat beside the river, recovering from the day's trials, Kale reached for her hand. The touch was gentle, grounding, yet it carried the weight of everything they had endured together. "You have changed," he said softly, golden eyes locking on hers. "Not just by being brave, but by understanding. You have faced shadows, fear, and the unknown, and yet here you are." Alara's heart swelled. I want to help you," she said. "I will not leave you no matter what comes." Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment the centuries of sorrow and solitude seemed to lift. "Then we face the coming days together," he said, "no matter the cost." The forest was quiet, the river murmuring softly as if approving their resolve. But beyond the trees, shadows stirred. The former advisor had not given up, and others would follow. The bond between healer and king had been tested and strengthened, but the trials were far from over. Alara tightened her grip on Kale's hand, feeling the pulse of the river, the heartbeat of the forest, and the power of the bond they had forged. She did not know what awaited them, but she understood one truth with absolute clarity. Together, they were stronger than fear, stronger than shadow, and stronger than the past that sought to claim them. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, a figure watched, waiting for the moment to strike again. Cliffhanger, as the moonlight glimmered on the river, Alara and Kale's bond had survived its first test. But a greater threat stirred beyond the forest, patient, cunning, and determined. The night would not be their last, and the true danger of the Alpha King's enemies was yet to come. The forest was quieter than usual, but the calm was deceptive. Alara sensed it in her bones, the kind of silence that comes just before a storm. The river beside the fortress shimmered in the morning light, calm and unassuming, yet beneath its surface, it carried the memory of their first encounter, of the bond that had begun there. Today, that bond would be tested like never before. Kale stood at the edge of the forest, shoulders squared, golden eyes scanning the horizon. His presence radiated power, yet there was tension beneath the surface. He had survived ambushes before, but this time, he knew it would be different. Their enemies were clever, patient, and cruel, and now they had discovered that Alara, the human who had saved him, was part of the equation. "Are you ready?" Kale asked, voice calm but edged with steel. Alara nodded, hands brushing against the small pouch of herbs at her belt. She had learned much over the past days, how to move silently, how to read the signs of the forest, and how to use the magic that had awakened in her when she saved Kale at the river. She was no longer just a healer. She had become a force in her own right. "I am," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We face them together." Kale's hand found hers, a grounding touch that sent a spark through her. "Together," he echoed, and for a moment the world seemed still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The attack came at dusk, shadows slipping through the trees, figures moving with lethal precision. The former advisor had returned, and with him, a host of hunters who sought to end Kale's life and claim the fortress for themselves. Kale moved like a shadow, golden eyes glowing, strength and grace combining as he fought with a precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. Alara stayed close, using her knowledge of herbs and the energy of the river to create barriers and distractions, guiding the flow of the battle in subtle ways. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kale said, deflecting a blow from a dark figure that lunged at him. "Do not falter now," Alara's heart pounded. She was afraid, yes, but she was also alive in a way she had never been before. Every moment of danger, every heartbeat in sync with Kale's made her feel more connected to him, more a part of his world. The battle raged on, shadows clashing with light, power against cunning. And then, in a daring move, the former advisor lunged toward Kale, dagger in hand. Alara acted without hesitation. She grabbed a vial of herbs, throwing its contents into the path of the enemy. Smoke filled the air, and the advisor staggered, coughing and blinded. Kale took the opportunity to strike decisively, sending the intruder fleeing into the forest, defeated, for now. Breathing heavily, Kale turned to Alara, his golden eyes filled with a mix of admiration and concern. "You saved my life," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Alara's chest heaved. "No, we saved each other," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. She realized then that their bond was more than survival. It was a connection forged in courage, trust, and shared purpose. The forest grew quiet once more, the attackers retreating, but Alara knew this peace was temporary. Kale's enemies were relentless, and their presence would always linger like a shadow. Yet in that moment she felt a sense of victory, not just in battle, but in the strength they had discovered within themselves. As night fell, Kale led her back to the river. The water glimmered under the moonlight, calm and serene. Alara knelt beside it, dipping her hands into the cool flow, letting the river's energy seep into her. She felt the bond between them deepen, a quiet power that pulsed with life and promise. "You have grown," Kale said, standing behind her, hand brushing her shoulder. "Not just in courage, but in understanding. The river chose wisely when it brought you to me." Alara turned to him, eyes reflecting the silver light of the water. I never expected any of this," she admitted. "I never imagined I would be part of a world like yours or part of your life." Kale's golden gaze softened. "And yet here you are. And now you have a choice, one that will shape not just your future, but the future of my people and this forest. Will you stand with me no matter the challenges that come?" Alara's heart swelled. She had come this far, faced danger, learned the ways of this hidden world, and discovered her own strength. The answer was clear. "I will stand with you," she said, "no matter what comes." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile, the first in many nights that was unshadowed by sorrow. "Then we face the future together," he said, his voice carrying the weight of promise. Days passed, and their lives became intertwined in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. Alara continued to heal and support, but she also trained in the arts Kale had shown her, learning to harness the subtle currents of magic, to sense danger, and to act with precision. Kale, in turn, allowed himself to show vulnerability, trusting her with the weight of his past, his burdens, and his fears. Together, they ventured into the forest, reclaiming lost territory, restoring areas where the shadow of Kale's enemies had left decay and fear. Alara's presence brought a new energy, a balance of human compassion and awakened magic that even Kale had not anticipated. The fortress began to feel alive again, not just as a place of power, but as a home where hope and courage could flourish. One evening, standing on a hill overlooking the river, Kale spoke quietly. "There will always be threats," he said, "enemies who seek to undo what we have built, but now, with you by my side, I am no longer alone. And perhaps I can finally begin to heal from the wounds that have haunted me for centuries." Alara's hand found his, fingers intertwining. "We heal together," she said softly, "and face whatever comes together." The river below shimmered with moonlight, a silent witness to their promise. The forest whispered its approval, and even the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if recognizing the bond that had been forged through trials, courage, and trust. But their journey was far from over. In the distance, beyond the mountains, a shadow stirred. A new force, patient and cunning, had sensed the resurgence of the Alpha King and the strength of the bond he had formed. The night was calm, yet the world beyond the forest held dangers yet unseen. Alara and Kale returned to the fortress, weary but resolute. The battles had changed them, strengthened them, and bound them in ways that could not be broken. They had faced fear, darkness, and the remnants of betrayal and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as partners in a world that demanded courage, wisdom, and heart. Kale looked at her, golden eyes soft and steady. "The river brought us together," he said. "And now it carries us forward into whatever future awaits. I do not know what it holds, but I know this, we face it as one." Alara smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "As one," she echoed. She had come to understand that love and trust were not weaknesses, but sources of power, guiding them through shadow and danger alike. The fortress settled into quiet, the river flowing gently at its edge. Yet in the silence, Alara could feel the pulse of life, the energy of the forest, and the enduring strength of the bond she shared with Kale. It was a bond forged in courage, tested by shadows, and strengthened by trust. And it was a bond that would carry them forward, no matter what the world demanded. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight touched the river, casting it in a golden glow. Alara and Kale stood together at its edge, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. They had survived the shadows of the past, faced the trials of the present, and now looked toward the future with determination and hope. And though dangers would come again and enemies would rise, the bond between the human healer and the Alpha King was unbreakable. The river, witness to the beginning of their journey, flowed endlessly, carrying the promise of courage, love, and redemption into the days ahead. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the mountains and the forests, shadows still lingered, waiting, watching. But for now, in this quiet moment, Alara and Kale stood as one, healed, strong, and ready for whatever challenges awaited. The Alpha King's life had been saved once, and now, with the healer by his side, he would face the world renewed, bound by a bond that neither curse nor enemy could sever. The forest whispered its approval, the river shimmered in celebration, and the stars above shone brighter, as if blessing the union of courage and heart. Alara rested her head against Kale's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and for the first time in her life she felt completely at peace. The night had tested them, the shadows had challenged them, but together they had emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future, and whatever destiny the river had yet to reveal.